On Wednesday, the district attorney issued an indictment for 4 people related to the ongoing district attorney's investigation related to construction. The 4 people indicted were Pat Pope, now Pat Reed, she's divorced, her former husband Tony Pope, who's the owner of the architectural firm, Quinta Moody, who is Pat Pope's executive assistant. She's a DeKalb County School System employee at the time, and Dr. Lewis. Okay? There are the indictment, just to give you the context, because some of you may not know this, the indictment itself was, I believe, 170 some pages with about 800 or so pages of attachments. Very, very comprehensive document, a lot of detail. For background, and I'm going to kind of go into some details. For background, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with this, you'll remember that the allegations had been that Pat Pope, an employee of the DeKalb County School System, over our construction project, was bid rigging or otherwise influencing the bid process to go to contractors who would in turn employ her husband, who's the owner of an architectural firm. So all the allegations relate to directing business to her husband's firm. Okay? How did this happen? And I can't cover all 179 pages, but I want you to understand what the allegations are. How did it happen? Okay? One allegation is that, frankly, the bid, the actual scoring sheet, was changed. There are charges of forgery in there. So if you have a committee that evaluates bids, and I'm one of the people on that committee, and I evaluate and I put my scores, and I total it, and I add it, and you look at what the committee does, and you say, well, we added up all the scores based upon the criteria, who won? Well, you would have, the allegation is you had a committee that went and did that, and surprise, surprise, people said, that's not my signature and that's not who I scored as the winning bidder. And so the allegation is she took the bid sheets, altered them, forged their signatures, and created a new winner in at least one instance. In another instance, the allegation would say, and I'm trying not to get too much into the contracting stuff, but there are different ways of bidding contracts. Sometimes you'll have an architect who would bid directly to the school system, and you'd have a contractor. So the guy that designs it would have one bid, and the guy that builds it would have a second bid. Okay, so that's separate, where build and design are separate. Her husband, when she became an employee, Pat became an employee of the system, her husband was prohibited from doing any other further work for the district. So that means if we have a bid that has separate architect, separate builder, there's going to be a separate RFP directly with the architect. Her husband could not bid on that. He wasn't eligible. So, in several of the cases, the allegation is she changed it from build, design and build separate to build, design together, where you have the general contractor, and that general contractor would subcontract to the architect. Why is that important? 2 reasons. One, now the school system would never be her husband would never be in a position to having to bid for school system work he's prohibited from doing. He'd go and talk to the general contractor and try to be a subcontractor down here. So the board has no visibility. When we approve a contract, if it's ABC Construction Company, we don't say, oh, by the way, after you get this bid, can you tell us all your No, we hire someone, and the bid is to do all the work. Okay? So in several instances, the indictment will say she changed the way the bid was going to happen so that now her husband could do work indirectly for the system that he couldn't do directly for the system, okay? And so what you need to remember is there's different allegations, but they all relate to directing business to her husband's firm, okay? And the indictment said that the board was intentionally deceived. Okay? Well, the reason the board was intentionally deceived is because she couldn't send a proposal to the board and us have a public meeting and award business that's prohibited to her husband. There was zero chance of that. We might be a little bit slow at at working things out at times, but even the DeKalb Board of Education isn't going to, in a public meeting after review by attorney, award something to a prohibited member. I can assure you of that. So she was smart enough to know the only way she'd get that business, again, I'm referring to the allegations, is if she did it through these vendors. What you will notice missing from the indictment are all these contractors. Because the first thing I thought was, well, you know, there's Pat and her husband, but we got all these people in the middle. What about them? You know, aren't they part of this scheme? And the reason that they are not included in the scheme is because Pat, whenever the contractors would say, "Are you sure your husband's firm can do business with the school system?" the district attorney was able to see that she was communicating with them and telling them things like, "I've checked it out, I've verified it with general counsel, it's permissible." And so these companies are going, "You sure he's allowed to do work for us and we can do work for you?" Because they're not foolish. It's a small, construction's a small community. They knew that that was her husband's firm. And so you have all this correspondence where companies are saying, "I need you to verify, are you sure?" And they fully cooperated early on with the district attorney. So they're not being indicted. They're going to be on the witness side of this thing to say, here's what was told to me, so that's why you don't see any of these, I don't say middlemen because it gives a negative connotation, but the contractors that were between essentially the school system and her husband's firm. That's why you don't see any of them in there.